How's it going, everyone? We gotta talk about these game price points, man. A lot of talk around Doom the Dark Ages and the relatively lackluster Steam numbers that game is pulling. Now, obviously, Doom the Dark Ages is available on Xbox Game Pass, but the numbers that Doom the Dark Ages is pulling is so far below recent Xbox Game Pass releases, the Oblivion Remastered and Claire Obscure Expedition 33, that it does make you think, man, what does Oblivion and Expedition 33 have in common that Doom the Dark Ages doesn't have? Oh, I can't put my finger on it. Oh, Oblivion was $50, Expedition 33 was $50, Doom the Dark Ages is a $70 release. I want to talk a little bit about that, and on top of that, Shuhei Yoshida, longtime PlayStation executive, spoke a little bit on game price points, and that's getting a lot of traction as well. We'll talk that at the end of this video. But first of all, Doom the Dark Ages, let's talk about that. The game is great. I think Doom the Dark Ages is awesome. I've been playing it. However, there's been a microscope attached to the lackluster Steam numbers. The Steam number has Doom the Dark Ages peaking at around 30,000 concurrent players. Let me pull up the exact number for you guys. So it's 31,470 is the all-time peak 2 days ago as I'm recording this video. The 24-hour peak is 29,986. So around that 30,000 mark. Now, obviously, the game is available on Xbox Game Pass. However, comparing it to games such as Expedition 33, that game peaked at 145,000 concurrent players, while Oblivion Remastered, again, both of those games obviously available on Game Pass, peaked at 216,000 concurrent players. Now, those games are both $50 releases, so obviously the cheaper game is doing a lot better than Doom being $70. Now, in the sense of Doom, it's interesting because that 30,000 number is so bad. To put it in context, Persona 3 Reload was also available on Xbox Game Pass. That game peaked at 45,000 concurrent players, and you know, to the PC audience, is Persona bigger than Doom? I would say no way in hell is Persona bigger. However, Persona is a game that, while it is $70, does offer you quite a lot of content for your dollar. So you can look at it in a variety of different schools of thought. Now, if you look at it also with recent Xbox published games, Doom is doing much better than Avowed, which peaked at 19,000. Avowed, also a $70 Xbox Game Pass title. Well, a $70 game that's also available on Xbox Game Pass. Now, what about Indiana Jones? Let's pull up Indiana Jones because I actually don't have that number off the top of my head. That game peaked at 12,000. So it really seems to be a trend that the $70 Xbox Game Pass titles are doing very, very poorly. And is it just Xbox Game Pass $70 titles, or is it $70 titles in general? Well, you know, there are $70 titles that actually do fairly decently. Like that Persona 3 Reload number at 45,000, not bad. Metaphor ReFantazio, north of 80,000, not bad for those style of games. Dragon's Dogma 2, $70, did very well. These are Steam prices. That's why, you know, some games on Steam come out at $70, some games come out at 60. Those all aforementioned titles, $70 games. Dragon's Dogma 2, like I said, peaked at north of 200,000. Those are the $70 games that are doing well. There are other $70 games that don't do so well. Immortals of Aveum, Callisto Protocol, Need for Speed Unbound. I think that's a relevant number since that is a notable IP. Now, Need for Speed has kind of been on the downturn for a while, but Unbound, Need for Speed Unbound, I should say, peaked at 14,000 concurrent players. You know, there are $70 games that can do well, but it reiterates the point that I've been making for a while, and that brings me the quote from Shuhei Yoshida. He noted, in terms of actual price of $70 or $80 for really great games, I think it will still be a steal in terms of the amount of entertainment that the top games, top quality games bring to people compared to other forms of entertainment. As long as people choose carefully how they spend their money, I don't think they should be complaining. Honestly, agree with them 100%. $70 or $80 games are fine. I mean, you know, fine is a subjective term. To you, they might not be fine. To me, they might not be fine. However, it comes back to the quality of the game. There are certain games, and I would argue it is very much a select few games that can get away with a $70 price point. Dragon Ball Sparking Zero came out at $70, and that game sold incredibly well. The hype was there, and it did really well from a commercial standpoint. Dragon's Dogma 2, hype was there. There's a lot of content in Dragon's Dogma 2. That game did really well. Then you look at Metaphor, that game did really well. Stellar Blade did really well, and it's not as lengthy as some of these other $70 titles, but Stellar Blade seemingly did very well. I do think dropping a game at $60 on PC makes more sense. There's sometimes that $10 price discrepancy on PlayStation versus PC. I do think it makes sense for a lot of these games to go with a $60 price point on PC versus the $70 that you would see on console. I think Doom would have very much benefited from that. I think Doom would have benefited at being at $50. I think if Doom the Dark Ages was at $50, a ton of people would end up buying that. However, in the case of Dark Ages, Avowed, Indiana Jones, the argument can be made to keep those games priced high because it creates that attractive option for Xbox Game Pass. It makes Game Pass even more attractive when you see, hey, Doom's $70 over here, I can just sign up for Game Pass. And that's a number that isn't quantifiable to us since those numbers aren't as public as Steam database. However, you know, I would still say that 30,000 number is incredibly disappointing for Doom the Dark Ages, but when it comes to $70 games in general, Grand Theft Auto 6, $70, $80, $100, that game's gonna be fine. Death Stranding 2, $70, that game's gonna be fine. A lot of upcoming games at $70 are gonna be fine. A Wushang Fallen Feathers, that game being priced at $50, I think is genius. Mafia the Old Country being priced at $50, I think that's genius. And you look at Mafia the Old Country, what's interesting about that game is, yes, it's $50. Love that it's $50, but from the standpoint of just how many hours of gameplay that you're getting for that $50, proportionally, it might be less in terms of dollars spent per hour of gameplay than a lot of these $70 games, but I think Mafia, a lot of people are just going to look at that and be like, hey, that's a notable IP, and they're going the $50 price point. Even if it is a 10 to 15 hour game, I think people are still going to gravitate towards it because 10 to 15 hours is perceived as fairly short, just on the basis that it is $50 and people are like, wow, they're actually pricing a game from a notable IP at $50. That's attractive to people, because I don't think in all instances, and it's hard to just say, a blanket statement that covers everyone. But I think for a lot of people, when they see the $70 or $80 price point, it's not about they can't afford $70 or $80. I think it comes down to principle for a lot of people, where it's like, bro, $70 for a video game? They just perceive that as being too expensive. It doesn't matter if it has 10 hours of content, 20 hours of content, a billion hours of content. For a lot of people, $70 games, you better be a damn good game if they're gonna drop $70 on it. And there are just some games that aren't gonna meet that threshold, and they're not avoiding paying $70 because they can't afford it. Just from a principle standpoint, they don't justify it of spending $70, and I think people came down to that conclusion with Doom the Dark Ages. I don't think they're gonna come to that conclusion with Death Stranding 2. I don't think they're gonna come to that conclusion with a lot of other games, but if Wushang Fallen Feathers was $70, I think there would be people pushed away. Hell, I think if Expedition 33 was 70 or 80 bucks, I think the game is worth that because it's so good, but I think there would be people pushed away from that. I think it's time to be more selective of where you price these games at. Not everything can be $70. Callisto Protocol shouldn't have been $70. Immortals of Aveum shouldn't have been $70. Would those games have flopped anyway? Probably, but being $70 didn't help. Wild Hearts being 70 bucks. Again, these $50 games are just getting so much traction now that I think other publishers should look at it. And maybe it'll be a lot of, okay, now there's too many games at $50, but again, there's gonna be a lot of $70, $80 games as well, and you just have to be selective. And I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with a $70 game, as long as it's a damn good game at a high level. And how everyone subjectively views that, again, that's gonna be an individual opinion. Some people might look at a Doom the Dark Ages and be like, that's the best $70 I spent in a while, but I think for a lot of people, they've decided not to go down that route. And I think, you know, there are other factors with Doom the Dark Ages that unfortunately have been pretty negative, and I don't think it's that big of a deal given that it's on Xbox Game Pass. We can't quantify those numbers. I think a ton of people gravitated towards Game Pass, but when you compare it to the recent $50 games, and you could say, hey, Oblivion's a juggernaut IP, it's so notable. I mean, Doom's a notable IP as well, and Oblivion was a remaster, but it is at $50. Expedition, a brand new IP, and not everything can be Expedition, but Expedition 33 doing damn near 5x the concurrent player count number for Doom the Dark Ages. 6 months ago, who would have predicted that? Nobody would have predicted that, but that is the case, and that is what happened. I am very curious to see how Mafia Old Country does. As long as that's a good game, man, I think it's going to do very well on the basis of it just being 50 bucks, but definitely a story to follow. And when it comes to these higher price point games, I get that these games are expensive to develop for, but if it's a $70 or $80 game, you gotta be selective about it, and it's not just from the basis of, oh, I can't afford the $70 game. I think there's a principle there where people are willing to spend $70 on a game. It's been proven with the Dogma 2s, with the Metaphor Refantazios, with a lot of games. However, a lot of games, I think that $70 price point is just going to push people away, and I think that $10 difference of 60 to 70, man, you better be a damn good game if you're going to make that difference, or from 50 to 70, because now the Expedition 33s, the Oblivion remaster, they're kind of just exposing a lot of these $70 games as being overpriced. But that'll do it for me. Interested to hear what you guys think. Sound off down below. Thank you for watching, and goodbye. Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, make sure to hit the subscribe button, and if you're already subscribed, do us a favor and hit the bell icon. This way you'll be notified whenever we post a new video. That's the best way to keep up with all of our uploads, and we usually try to upload 2 videos a day. And with the bell icon hit, you'll be notified whenever we do upload a video. As always, thanks for watching.